Welcome members and supporters to the Black History of Chatham County program. This program is sponsored by the Community Remembrance Coalition Chatham and NAACP branches 5377 and 5378. I am Mary Nettles, president of the Community Remembrance Coalition Chatham and the NAACP branch number 5379. I am glad that you were able to attend in person or by Zoom. To begin the program, Ms. Jetta Parker will read the Community Remembrance Coalition Chatham mission statement and the NAACP mission statement.
The mission of the NAACP is to ensure the political, educational, social, and economic equality of rights of all persons and to eliminate racial hatred and racial discrimination. The mission of the Community Remembrance Committee Chatham is to improve race relations, enhance comedy, empathy, and understanding across and within Chatham County's races, faiths, and communities. Thank you.
Now we will have remarks by Ms. Mary Harris. Ms. Harris is co-coordinator of the Community Remembrance Coalition Chatham. Following Ms. Harris, we will have a music selection by Wood Charter School.
The life of Eugene Daniels, and of course the others, so many others whose lives were shed as they suffered as criminals, just to go unnoticed, denied, pushed in the back of the minds of so many to allow this young Black man, as so many like him and other people of color who lived and then had to come to a terrible and tragic end. This day is to share and enlighten us of the best future we must create for our young men and women as they tread sometimes a lonesome valley. To ignore that is to ignore, hide our heads in the sand, to pretend this ugly truth didn't happen. Many lives over the years have been sacrificed for us, your children, our Black and brown children, who try to navigate in this not so perfect and always changing world. Are we better as we try to bridge the racial inequities and inequalities? As we welcome and celebrate diversity? Yes, but we must go forth with our eyes, hearts, and minds and be ready to be the change and make the change and move to revealing and recognizing how the system has failed so many of our Eugene Daniels. As we brave forth, are we brave enough to go forth as Amanda Corman, the great young poet who spoke at the inauguration and challenged us? Am I brave enough? Let's make it a personal matter. Am I brave enough to challenge the system? In order to enrich our future, the future of our children and adults alike, let us continue to press as we go forth from this day, be an ambassador so that Chatham and the world will shine in greatness as it was intended from the beginning. Let us remember not to forget the so many Eugene Daniels of today. Thank you very much.
Jordan, and what did I see? Coming for to carry me home. A band of angels are coming after me. Coming for to carry me home. to, coming for to carry me home. Well, all my friends I'm a coming to, coming for to carry me home. Swing low, sweet chariot, coming for to carry me home. Swing low, sweet chariot, coming for to carry me home. When I'm sometimes up and sometimes down, coming for to carry me home. But still my soul is a glory bound, coming for to carry me home. Swing low, sweet chariot, coming for to carry me home. Swing low, sweet chariot, coming for to carry me home. Coming for to carry me home.
At this time, we will have comments for our very own U.S. Congressman David Price. After Congressman Price, we will hear from Reverend Dr. T. Anthony Spearman, State NAACP President.
Thank you, Mary. It's a privilege to be with you today and to address the Chatham County NAACP and the friends, associates of the organization, and those who want to commemorate this occasion. It's a very important time, and I'm very happy to have Chatham County back in the 4th Congressional District, and to once again enjoy the leadership of people like Mary Nettles and Mary Harris, and to remember people like Margaret Pollard, leaders we've worked with over many years. Today we are marking the centennial, 100 years since the violent murder of Eugene Daniel. That's 100 years without real accountability, without justice for the mob who kidnapped and lynched a teenage boy on the very grounds we're meeting on today. 100 years of grieving a life taken by extrajudicial terror. Today, despite the absence of legal justice, we are bringing a measure of remembrance and respect to Eugene through song, ceremony, and conversations. I want to touch briefly on a few reasons I think an event such like this are such importance, why they warrant reflections, and what role the federal government can play nowadays in aiding reconciliation and memorialization efforts. The tragic act acted out on this very soil was one of over 120 reported lynchings in North Carolina. This local history is woven into a patchwork of regional history and ultimately our national history. This history includes the 1918 lynching of Tom Devitt in my hometown in East Tennessee, an event that was whispered about as I was growing up, but to this day has never been adequately acknowledged or memorialized. These histories, especially those of devastating racial violence, are critical to telling the story of this country, the full story. There's no reason we should shrink from the full, honest accounting of our history. In fact, we must embrace it because it includes the honorable and it includes the dishonorable. The telling and the presentation of these stories are needed to understand and grapple with the truth, to understand what has brought us here and to chart a better path for the future. I remember a narrative about a much less drastic event, but nonetheless one that was moving to me. Heard this from a classmate who had gone to UNC with me. And he had spoken to one of the first African-American students to come to the campus when we were there. And this man spoke about his early days, his first days on campus, and what a jarring experience it was to walk past Silent Sam. And he said to my friend, you know, in my subsequent 4 years, I could never bring myself to walk that way again. Think about that. Now, I was a student. I thought I was pretty tuned in to what was going on. I was sympathetic to the civil rights movement, helped with the sit-ins in the theaters and restaurants, very sympathetic to joining the calls for liberation and true equality. But I must tell you that that story jarred me. It never occurred to me what my fellow students were going through, particularly the Black students who were at that moment integrating our campus. What it meant to navigate such an institution that memorialized such harmful narratives. So 50 years later, I'm able to catch a glimpse, to gain insight because of that story. So stories like that make us realize how little sometimes we've known about our past or have sensed about what's going on around us. So they certainly make us hungry to know more, to know the truth beyond reality that we refer to and experience firsthand. Historical context built up by local stories, such as those in Chatham and Orange counties, begin to change the way we see the reality we live in, the way we understand it. It constitutes, it contributes to how we can and must reimagine and rebuild our communities, our country. So often built on the wrongs, on the injustices of past generations. And sometimes those injustices remain today, sustained by laws and practices and norms. So we talk about politics and policies and we get into these debates, but the different levels of understanding and empathy that stories bring are really important. It's really important for those stories to feed these debates. We shouldn't underestimate how much we need to learn, how much we need to empathize, the kind of depth of understanding that we need to truly rectify the past to the extent we can, and certainly to chart a more positive path forward. In the US Congress, despite over 200 proposals over the years to explicitly define lynching as a hate crime, we have yet to do so. In this Congress, Representative Bobby Rush of Illinois, my friend, has once again filed the Emmett Till Anti-Lynching Act. I'm a co-sponsor of that. It is a bill that passed overwhelmingly in the last Congress, but was never brought to a vote in the Senate. There are other measures that are important. I'll just mention one more. I'm co-sponsoring a resolution introduced by another friend, Barbara Lee of California. She is urging the establishment of a U.S. Commission on Truth, Racial Healing, and Transformation. This commission, modeled after commissions established in post-apartheid South Africa and a few other countries, would examine the effects of slavery, institutional racism, discrimination against people of color, and how our history, how this history feeds into laws and practices and policies today. Federal government does have a role and a responsibility to collectively recognize this past and to learn from it as we try to bend the arc of history, the moral universe, toward a just and equitable, beloved community. So I want to once again thank my friends and colleagues for the opportunity to join in this celebration, particularly Mary Nettles, who's made sure we were on track to be here today. Want to thank all of you for organizing this reflection and for the insight, the self-awareness it will bring to our community. I think it'll make us better people, more understanding people, and help us chart a better future. Thank you so much.
At this time, please sit back and enjoy a short documentary by Mr. Mark Barroso on Eugene Daniels' life.
Hello, my name is Mark Barroso, and I've been researching the last known act of terrorism in Chatham County that happened exactly 100 years ago next month, which means that the participants were the grandfathers or the great-grandfathers of people living today. Almost everything we know about Chatham County 100 years ago, outside of personal accounts, is from the Chatham Record, forerunner of today's newspaper, the Chatham News and Record. I read every paper from a year before and a year after the lynching to get a sense of what our community was like. The newspaper was the sole source of information in 1921. It was before radio and, of course, television, and its ability to reflect and shape attitudes of race, class, and politics cannot be overstated. So let us begin with the September 22nd, 1921 edition of the Chatham Record, where buried below the news of a new railroad, a squirrel eating hickory nuts, the apprehension of a bootlegger, and a plea for colored folks to go to church, was a small story about the lynching of Eugene Daniel.
Okay. Lynched Sunday. Last Friday night, September 16th, Eugene Daniels, colored, entered the home of Walter Stone in New Hope Township and attempted a criminal assault upon his daughter, Miss Gertrude Stone, while he was away from home hunting. The young lady gave the alarm, and a hunt for her assailant was begun. Bloodhounds secured from Rayford on Saturday tracked Daniels to his home, and he was arrested in the afternoon, making confession of his guilt to the officers. I know what's coming, see. He was placed in jail here Saturday night, and at about 2 o'clock Sunday morning, he was taken there by an angry set of men, carried 5 miles east of town, and there, I don't know if I can get any further, there, swung up with an altered tire chain and his body filled with bullets. Several crimes having been committed in rapid rotation here had worked the people into a frenzy, and the folks that carried out these plans allowed the head to run away with the heart. And while it is a bad reputation for any town or county to acquire, it is too late to counsel in the matter. Our appeal to all would be to love mankind, to do noble things, and make life and that vast forever one grand, sweet song.
Nothing is known about Eugene Daniel as a boy. Was he shy? Was he a cut-up? Did he do his chores? Was he a mama's boy? Sadly, there are no words written by him, nor are there any photos that can be found. Even the site of the lynching is likely underwater, made so when Jordan Lake was created. At the heart of this story are two families, that of Walter Stone and John Daniel, or Daniels. He seemed to use both, neighbors living in the Bells area on Farrington Road. But it's also the story of a community that enabled the murderers to escape accountability for their crime. It was common knowledge who was behind the lynching, yet no one said a word until now. No one will ever be able to say conclusively who killed Eugene Daniel, but there are powerful clues in the public record. Walter Stone, a white man whose family had deep roots in Chatham, inherited 112 acres of land in 1903 and began growing corn and tobacco. He was also paid to maintain the roads in New Hope Township and worked on election day. He and his wife Minnie fathered two children, Ernest and Gertrude. Walter's brother, Thomas Stone, wanted nothing to do with farming and sold his inheritance, 88 acres, to John Daniel, a black man, for $3,500, making Walter and John Daniel neighbors. 2 years before the lynching, John Daniel and his wife, Ida, moved in with 11 children and began farming. Eugene, 14 at the time, was the middle child. Next door, on the other side of the Daniels farm, was Charlie Lassiter, a sheriff's deputy. And down the road, J.M. Womble, also a deputy. And where Highway 64 is today, a justice of the peace, N.J. Wilson. So now let's fast forward 2 years to 1921. That year, the readers of the Chatham Record were peppered with stories of a black woman killing her father, a black man shooting his wife, many black men arrested for bootlegging. It even advocated for the Klan to come back to Pittsburgh.
There may or may not have been a Ku Klux Klan organization here, but it would not hurt if there was one. Many years ago, the Ku Klux was a big thing and doing good.
And then about a month before Eugene Daniels was lynched, a black man in Siler City shot his former white boss who owed him money. But even more unsettling was a week before when a popular merchant named J.C. Lanius, a white man, was murdered and robbed while walking home after business hours. A black man named Peter Rogers was accused. The newspaper wrote,
Bloodhounds were gotten from Rayford, and they tracked Peter Rogers, a colored man, to his home. It is generally believed that the guilty man has been captured.
Sensing a lynching was about to happen, Sheriff G.W. Blair whisked Rogers from town to a Raleigh jail to thwart the mob that was gathering in Pittsburgh, just like he had done the week before in Siler City. Twice, Sheriff Blair saved accused men from a mob, but sadly, a month later, when the mob came for Eugene Daniel, Sheriff Blair would not be found. But I get ahead of myself. When it came time for the Rogers trial, a local judge agreed to move the sensational trial 90 miles away to Wayne County because, a citizen noted,
it appeared to the judge that public sentiment was thoroughly crystallized against the Negro in Chatham.
When an all-white jury in another county found Rogers not guilty a month later, it was a minor story in the Chatham Record. It seemed the dogs had gotten the wrong man, and a month later, those same dogs would sniff out Eugene Daniel. In the decades before World War II, African Americans made up nearly a third of the population in Chatham County. They worked as farmhands, maids, craftsmen, and shopkeepers in a bustling downtown Pittsburgh. Without their labor, white farmers could not harvest their crops. Okay, so what really happened that night at Walter Stone's house? It was a sweltering 94 degrees on September 15th when, according to her father, Gertrude woke up in this house in the middle of the night. Yes, it's still there on Stone Drive. Saw someone and screamed. That person then ran away without harming her. Walter told reporters he had been out coon hunting all night and heard the story from his wife the next morning. A posse was formed with deputies Womble and Lassiter and Justice of the Peace Wilson. The hound dogs were called in from Rayford, the same hounds that got the wrong man in the Lanius murder a month earlier. The dogs didn't have far to go. Running through the cotton fields to the neighbor's house, they found Eugene, who had turned 16 5 days earlier. After intense questioning, the deputies got Eugene to confess and took him to the town jail 14 miles away. The Charlotte News reported,
The Negro apparently was not taken before his intended victim for identification. The fact that the hounds followed the trail straight to the Negro without hesitation was also taken as satisfactory evidence of the guilt of the Negro.
that's all it took. No trial, no evidence, no cross-examination. Eugene was convicted by a secondhand story and the noses of dogs. By now, you know what happened next, except that at sunrise, about 1,000 Chatham citizens arrived in their cars on horseback and on foot, hoping to see the mob's handiwork. And still, no sign of Sheriff Blair. There's one question that always bugged me about this story. Why Moore's Bridge, 5 miles from the jail? Why not just lynch him in town? I discovered that Moore's Bridge was on the property of Carrie D. Moore, also known as C.D. Moore, one of the most powerful men in Chatham County. He and his father built the bridge in 1889, and it was one of the few routes to Raleigh. At one time, a lumber mill and a cotton mill operated there. But C.D. Moore liked to call himself a farmer. However, he was also director of the Bank of Pittsburgh, which held the mortgages of many farmers in Chatham. His father built the Pleasant Hill Baptist Church, where he attended regularly. He even worked for the county coroner, who decided whether or not to investigate any murder in Chatham. To top it all off, he was the former chair of the county commission. He would eventually serve as a commissioner for 30 years. And he was also the grandfather of Gertrude Stone. After Eugene's body was taken down from Moore's tree, it was up to Moore's part-time employer, the coroner George H. Brooks, to investigate the murder. But he didn't investigate. Citizens who sat on a board of inquest convened by Brooks agreed not to investigate and covered up who killed Eugene Daniel. They were James Singleton Sutphin from Alamance County, C.A. Poole, a cashier at the local bank, William H. Ward, a farmer and civilian crime investigator, H. Hackney, the local barber, Ernest Boone, a grocer and son-in-law of C.D. Moore, and G.J. Griffin, a Pittsburgh commissioner and owner of a hardware store with Coroner Brooks. Brooks, an elected politician, instead hastily wrote the cause of death as hanging and gunshot wounds, putting an official end to the crime. But I discovered that it took an anonymous clerk at the State Office of Vital Records to add to his death certificate that Eugene was lynched by a mob. A week later, a letter writer to the Chatham Records said the obvious truth.
We never thought that the best, leading, clear-minded, sober-thinking people of a community would be found in a mob, taking human life in the most brutal way, regardless of race or color. And furthermore, if ever found out, anyone in the party would have been tried for murder. But there is a class of people that will take a chance on that never being found out.
A few weeks later, C.D. Moore was paid $100 by the county for the expense of the hound dogs. So, C.D. Moore provided the means and the motive to accuse Eugene, the place to murder him, and had the power to quash an investigation. So what happened to the Stone and Daniel families after the lynching? Walter Stone seems to have given up on farming and moved his family within a few years of the lynching. Daughter Gertrude married 12 years later and never had children. She died in a nursing home in Durham in 1998 at the age of 94. Her brother, Ernest, had never had children either, so the bloodline of Walter and Ida Stone ceased to exist. C.D. Moore lived another 17 years. His death was major headlines in Chatham and Raleigh, which touted his long public service.
He was a man of unquestionable integrity and devotion to his family. He was admired as a fine Christian by all who knew him.
He is buried at Pleasant Hill Baptist Church in Chatham County. Eugene's father, John Daniel, never left farming and died in 1935. He left behind 129 acres of farmland valued at over $3,500 for his wife and children. It was a sizable estate in the middle of the Great Depression. Some of his children moved to Durham and others to Trenton, New Jersey, the last of which died only a few years ago. Eugene is the only child of John and Ida Daniel who is buried with his parents. Because the press believed Walter Stone, he got to write the narrative of Eugene Daniel, then printed as fact in newspapers and repeated unchallenged even today. Everyone who has written about this lynching states that Eugene snuck into the bedroom of a white girl his own age to do her harm. But what if it was something else entirely? Yes, maybe Eugene was in Gertrude's room. But what if the 16-year-old boy and 17-year-old girl were in love, like Romeo and Juliet, and Gertrude's daddy made up a story to put an end to it? And then her all-powerful grandfather convinced a mob of 50 men to make an example of Eugene. It's as likely a story as Eugene sneaking into her room to do her harm. That's the problem with mob justice. No one will ever know the truth of what happened that night, except that a 16-year-old boy was taken from his mother's porch and viciously murdered by a not-so-anonymous mob, and that a county employee failed to protect Eugene from the mob, and another, the coroner, participated in the cover-up by not investigating his murder. There were plenty of good people in Chatham who were appalled by the murder of Eugene Daniel, but they remained silent. Let's not repeat that mistake.
From the Equal Justice Initiative out of Montgomery, Alabama, with us this afternoon. So we will hear at this time from both of them, Mr. Trey Walk, will you come forward, as well as Mr. Elliot Spiller. They are speaking on the importance of why we are here.
Hey everyone, good afternoon. My name is Elliot Spurs, and on behalf of myself and my colleague Trey Walk, it is an honor and a privilege to be with you all today. I want to thank the Chatham Remembrance Coalition, as well as the family of Mr. Eugene Daniel, elected officials, and the community of Chatham for allowing us to engage with you all for a couple of hours now. It's been, but it's been a fulfilling experience to be able to engage with you all in this process of repair here in Chatham. For over 30 years, EJI has worked to represent clients on death row in Alabama. We continue to challenge the inhumane conditions of confinement within our state jails and prisons consistently. We continue to challenge life without parole sentences for children sentenced to die in prison. We continue to provide reentry services to our clients as well once they've been released from prison in the state of Alabama, but also in other states across the country as well. And after about 30 years of recognizing the ways in which class and race both have impacted the way the life of our clients, I thought it was necessary for us to actually begin a process of talking about America's legacy and history of racial injustice and violence. And so in 2008, we actually began our Race and Poverty Initiative with two goals. One, to tangibly engage people with our community remembrance project efforts and our research, and that primarily is through the Soil Collection Community Remembrance Project, which this morning we actually collected soil from the approximate location for where Mr. Daniel was lynched. And, one jar of soil will be kept here in Chatham and will serve as a way for the community to actually deepen education and awareness about his lynching. And also another jar of soil similar to the one right here, exactly like the one here, will actually come back to Montgomery, Alabama with us, and will actually be displayed in our museum in Montgomery, the Legacy Museum from Enslavement to Mass Incarceration. Another way that we find opportunities to tangibly engage communities and people that reach out to us and want to connect is also through our historical marker project. So in counties across the country, we've documented lynchings to have happened. We actually work with coalitions of people to install historical markers that contextualize the story and the circumstances of the lynchings that occurred locally in an area. These markers are placed in specific locations that the community decides. So, and oftentimes it's the location for where the lynching actually happened. We talk about public spectacle lynchings, but a lot of people don't oftentimes understand or know exactly what public spectacle lynching is, or how we define lynchings. And so we are very intentional about saying and defining racial terror lynching. We believe that racial terror lynching is very separate and distinct of lynchings of other racial and ethnic groups, throughout that have been lynched throughout our history. We define racial terror lynching as the killing of a Black man, woman, or child, and killing can be hanging. It includes poison, it includes mutilation, it includes burning and drowning, and at the hands of 3 or more white individuals with the intent is important, with the intent of not just terrorizing the individual or individuals who were lynched, but the entire Black community as a whole. Oftentimes, when we examine racial terror lynchings, we see the ways in which the mob then turn its violence towards the Black community after they had already lynched the individual. Oftentimes, the families of these victims are forced to have to flee their community and their homes because of the violence, and they flee into other states and areas as refugees from this terrorism. And talking with LaWanda today and Wayne, it was really beautiful to see that despite the lynching of their relative, they and their family have decided to stay, and they did decide to stay. And that's very beautiful and unique and very powerful to think about. When we also, launched our Race and Poverty Initiative, we, thought it was important to also educate people about our work. And so we have a number of reports in our award-winning History of Racial Injustice calendar that, talks about a day in American history, each day in American history, when a moment or an event of racial injustice actually occurred. And, through this public education effort, people across the country are able to learn more about our work and be able to, I think, shepherd that history and carry that locally in their communities. Today, we have a number of our reports as well as our calendars that I, really encourage you all to pick up and take home with you and to read and to sit with the content and our reports and our work, because so much of that history, we're talking about today, but I think if you're like me, you oftentimes might need some space to help to process, and so the reports and our calendars and our projects are there for that as well. In 2018, we actually opened up the National Memorial for Peace and Justice and the Legacy Museum from Enslavement to Mass Incarceration, both of which are narrative sites and experiences that talk about the history of enslavement to today's crisis of mass incarceration today. Although America represents only 5% of the global population, our incarcerated population represents 25% of the global incarcerated. When we look at the history of educational inequality within our state schools and education systems, we can't deny the fact that the history and the present reality of discrimination and injustice happening in our schools has a direct link and tie and connection to this broader history of racial injustice in this country. And so just recently, we actually opened up a new museum in Montgomery that has the same name as the old one, the Legacy Museum. But in that space, we actually contextualize now the history of the transatlantic slave trade in the world, and specifically talk about how the domestic slave trade happened after centuries of kidnapping, of loss, of brutal violence, and extermination of kidnapped West Africans from Africa. And so in that exhibit, we talk about, that history in real ways, and we also contextualize the history of the Reconstruction era in America as well. And in that space, we also have a soil collection exhibit that, has the narrative that was read and parts of that narrative that was read earlier today about Mr. Daniel, but also the work of this coalition and the people here in Chatham. As an organization, we believe that it is important for us to actually transition into a new era of truth and justice. As an institution, we believe that in this country, we have not arrived at an understanding of fairness that actually is real and honest and meaningful. And so what does it mean for us as a society that is a post-genocidal nation, a society that exterminated indigenous people, a society that, continued and sustained chattel enslavement, that sustained racial violence and terror? What does it mean for us as a nation to still have the death penalty in this country? When you look at post-genocidal nations like Rwanda or South Africa, these are countries that don't have the death penalty. They don't have any monuments and memorials dedicated to defending and praising the architects of white supremacy in their countries. But here in America, we do have the death penalty. But as a nation, we have proven to ourselves that we can't trust ourselves to actually choose and determine who deserves to live and who deserves to die. And today, the history and the narrative of Mr. Daniel proves that in many ways. And it also proves that, and it shows that there are a number of institutions and people that were complicit and remain silent. When you come to our museum in Montgomery, you'll see our exhibit that talks about the complicity of newspapers and the press and lynchings, rather than actually naming those sources and actually, allowing for accountability to happen in their community. They decided to remain silent and to not share the names of the mob members who actually were responsible for Mr. Daniel's lynching. And so my colleague Trey will come up and share more about our process of moving our nation into a new era of truth and justice, and also our community remembrance projects as well. Hey, good afternoon. I've been so moved by this entire day, but that documentary really was emotional, and I think the visual, the audio of the story of Mr. Daniel, and then I'm hearing this rain back here, and when our memorial was opening, our executive director, Mr. Stevenson, tells a story about how we were really worried. We had invited all these people down to Montgomery for the opening, and the worst thing that can happen when you're having a big event is bad weather. And so people were outdoors, and it just starts pouring, which was the thing that was our worst nightmare. And we were like, no, this is really bad. And we realized that those raindrops weren't just rain, it wasn't just inclement weather, but it might have actually been something meaningful. It might have been tears of joy from the victims of racial terror lynching who were with us in that moment. And so I heard this rain, and I see this jar from Mr. Daniel. And so I'm just going to believe that is him letting us know that he's here with us. And what we're doing today is really meaningful and really special. Yeah, I know that we are here today. We're talking about Mr. Daniel, and then also in this event today, we're talking about the Black history in Chatham County. And I've been thinking about, sort of how we tie these threads together. I was reading over the Black History Tour document, which I'm really excited about. And it's such an amazing project for people to learn the sites of local Black history in the community. And thinking about how do we connect the history of Mr. Daniel to some of that other history. And it's a question that's a broader thing in American history and Black history, right? It's a history of the blues, that there's great sorrow and suffering and agony, and there's also a great struggle. And there's people who stood up and who push back at every single step of the way. And I think that these projects and what y'all are doing here today is choosing to step into that legacy of people who push back against these injustices. There are plenty of people in the community who turned a blind eye, who looked the other way, who didn't speak up, who had some sort of role in these instances of racial violence, but there are also people who stood up. And I'll share a personal thing. I was thinking more broadly about Black history, sort of thinking about this event, and one of my sort of personal touchstones and personal heroes is Ella Baker, went to school right down the road and is such an icon in the civil rights movement and the movement struggle. And she had this idea that ordinary people can do really extraordinary things, and they can change the world if they're committed to doing those things. They can make racial justice happen. And there's this book that I really love. It's called I've Got the Light of Freedom by a scholar named Charles Payne. And I want to read just a piece of it. He talks about why that wording, I've got the light of freedom, is really meaningful. And he says, I've got the light of freedom is a line from This Little Light of Mine, a staple of Black church music. This little light of mine is an appropriate symbol of the movement's rootedness in the cultural traditions of the rural Black South. Depending on tempo and emphasis, it can carry a variety of messages. In the small sanctified church in which I was raised, it was sung during collection, presumably signifying that whatever one had to give mattered to the Lord. In Mississippi, particularly, the song became an anthem of the movement and a special favorite song of Fannie Lou Hamer's. One activist wrote it was sung in churches, in freedom schools, on marches, on picket lines, at jails, and in Parchman Prison, where hundreds of demonstrators were jailed. The song became a force. And this is a part that always sticks with me. The idea that everyone had some part of freedom's light was close to the heart of the message that organizers carried both into the Delta and found there. And that idea is, I think, what these projects are encouraging us and giving us tools to do. Is all of us have a part to play in order to sort of correct against this history. And the lesson of history isn't just that things are inevitable. The lynching wasn't inevitable. It was a series of choices of people who made decisions or people who didn't act. And so we know that because history is a series of choices, our future is also the choices that we make. And we're sort of saying, we're going to do something different. And I want to encourage all of us to walk away today, not just having that information, but everyone in here making a commitment about what you're going to do moving forward. The coalition is working to install a historical marker memorializing Mr. Eugene Daniel. And on, continuing to do these soil collection projects, educating people about the history of racial violence in Chatham County. But everyone in here is in a circle. And so when you leave here on Monday, who are you going to have an uncomfortable conversation with? They're going to ask, how was your weekend? And are you going to say, I went to this event on Saturday where I talked about, did you know the lynching happened here? Are there political commitments you need to make? Are there monetary commitments you need to make? But everyone needs to leave here today thinking about, how am I going to shine, my freedom's light? How am I going to make choices that change this history and push us against it? And I think that era of truth and justice that Elliot mentioned, that's what that's about. And I think about all these leaders throughout our history. And I joke sometimes, I like to think, if I had been alive during the era of slavery, I would have been BFS with Harriet Tubman. We would have been like breaking people out, going up north on the Underground Railroad. Or if I had been alive during the era of racial terror lynchings, I would have been, with Ida B. Wells. We would have been ringing the alarm, or I would have been with, these civil rights leaders. And I'm kind of joking, but I'm also not, because I think it's important to think about what we would have done then. But that question begs, what are we doing now? And I think that all of y'all are committed to doing something. And so the thing I want to leave all of y'all with is to think about, what is a concrete commitment you're walking away from this event with. We came, we learned, we memorialized these people. And so what do we owe now? What do we need to do? And I'm going to close this out, but I think that, I would like for us to just sing a couple of verses of the song, just because I think it's so special. When we sing together, we're connected in ways that I think are important. And so I'm going to start us off. And y'all all know the song. We all sing it in school growing up. So, this little light of mine, I'm going to let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm going to let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine, let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Y'all are singing, come on, come on. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine, let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Yeah. Thanks, y'all, and I'm really excited. Yeah, really excited to see what's going to happen on the other side of this, from y'all committing to this process and to keeping this movement going. Thank you.
At this time, we will hear another musical selection by the Wood Charter School. Then we will hear from Dr. Charles Johnson. He's going to present a presentation from Slavery to Freedom, a history of African Americans in Chatham County.
Ain't gonna let nobody turn me around, turn me around, turn me around. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me around. Gonna keep on a walking, keep on a talking, marching up to freedom land. Ain't gonna let your ignorance turn me around, turn me around, turn me around. Ain't gonna let your ignorance turn me around. Gonna keep on a walking, keep on a talking, marching up to freedom land. Ain't gonna let your opinions turn me around, turn me around, turn me around. Ain't gonna let your opinions turn me around. Gonna keep marching up to freedom land, marching up to freedom land.
Let me say good afternoon to everyone. I'm Dr. Charles Denton Johnson, and I think we should have another round of applause for our young people for their outstanding singing. I am going to try to leave my camera on if I can, if the bandwidth here will permit me to do so. I have a presentation prepared, which I'm going to share now. I'm going to ask those who are in control of the event to make sure that what's on the screen is what should be on the screen.
That looks great.
Okay, thank you so much for that. Let me very quickly thank Mary Nettles and also my cargo, Mary Harris, for inviting me today. I've enjoyed the program, enjoyed the morning program also, which I thought was really, really outstanding. The title of this presentation is Black Chatham from Slavery to Freedom. I always like to start with just a little context and as a way of sort of centering us and helping us understand where we are. And I shared this slide that you can read, but I'll explain it for you. It essentially says that after 156 years of our being here in the United States, African Americans possess about 1% of land here, and we possess about 1% of the wealth. And that's a clear indication that there's quite a bit of work that is left for us to do. And I think if we're going to be honest and really think about a way forward, we have to be willing to embrace our past and understand how that has informed our present and how it has held African Americans in the place that we find ourselves today, with so little room to compromise. So let's go ahead and begin. I'm going to start with slavery, as I said, and I'm going to move through these slides fairly quickly. This is recorded, so you'll be able to return to it. So the peculiar institution, provenance. So if we think about where we come from, and it's important, we're always trying to get back to where to our roots. The largest number of Africans that were brought to Americas came out of West and West Central Africa, and the largest number actually went to Brazil and to the islands of the Caribbean. A very small number, less than 500,000, went actually directly to the United States. Of those that came to the Carolinas, they were brought from Barbados and Jamaica, transship, we'd say, and many of those that came from the Bight of Biafra and the Gold Coast. Now, the Bight of Biafra today, if you look at this map, it looks like someone's taken 2 bites out of this coastal region of Nigeria. And at the bottom right corner of the screen, that is the bite of Biafra there. Behind that bite, you have Igbo people, and those are some of the people that were brought here. On off the map to the left, actually just to the, I guess that would be to the west of the Volta River on that map, you would find the Akan people, which would be Ghana today. And those were some of the early people who were landed in the Carolinas and in Virginia. And this is a map that shows that. You can actually see individuals, if you look at Norfolk on the map, who came out of the Upper Guinea coast, and also the Igbo who came out, from behind the bite of Biafra. So slavery in the Piedmont, and Chatham sits squarely in the Piedmont. In most cases, what you had were smallhold farmers. These were farmers who had relatively small numbers of slaves, of enslaved people, compared to the eastern part of the state of North Carolina, where you had larger plantations and plantations that were developed along a similar line as those in South Carolina, and those that in South Carolina were based upon those that were established in the Caribbean, where you had really large numbers of enslaved workers working on really large plantations. This is the Market House in Fayetteville, North Carolina, and it was established there in about 1832. Many of settlers that came into the European settlers that came into Chatham came up the Cape Fear River, and of course, Fayetteville sits right on that, and this Market House is one place where people purchased enslaved property would have gone to purchase that property. I share this slide about seasoning only so that we understand that to create an enslaved person requires an intentional process, that is not our natural state, and that process of creating a non-person, essentially a Negro, is a process where we have to denude people of their culture, of their history, of their heritage, and so forth. And that is a very violent process. And it takes violence also to maintain people in that state. And that's part of the reason that we're having the discussions that we're having about Eugene Daniel today. Slaves, of course, their purpose was to labor, and we were engaged in just about every form of labor that required manual dexterity. Enslaved people, it should be known, had skills that Europeans wanted to have and that they put to use. This slide, you can see some of the types of labor that were performed in the Chatham area and beyond, and the labor systems that were used, task and gang and so forth. Slave life was bifurcated. It was separated between the cabin and the field, and between family of the enslaved person and the holder's family. And African Americans often mask their real feelings, as you could imagine, under the institution of slavery. But it was a very overbearing institution, and almost every aspect of a slave's life was manipulated and controlled. It has been said that there was very little hope for the slave other than that which they could draw from their religious beliefs and through their attachments to family. There are slave narratives that speak to the experience of enslaved people in Chatham County, and there were 12 of those. These narratives were taken back in the 1940s, and this is one, Charles Crump, who was born in 1854. And Crump stated that the Abenath who held him were not good to him, gave them very little to eat. And his opinion of them was that they were poor white trash who was trying to come up on their labor. So it was very clear that he had a very good understanding of his condition and that of the enslavers. Tempe Herndon Durham married Exeter Durham, and she had 11 children. And she indicated that because she had so many children in her, that her slave owner treated her perhaps with a little more privilege. Okay, so we come to lynching, and a lot has been said about lynching. I actually prepared a paper on lynching. If you're looking at the slide that describes it, and that paper looks at how some scholars today are trying to make the argument that lynching and that frontier justice are synonymous, and nothing can be further from the truth. There is a long history and heritage that we associate with lynching, and lynching itself is an exercise of power and domination from the white community collectively over the African American community as a form of social control. And it has roots that reach back to slavery. And in the period, especially the period that follows slavery, when some 4 million African Americans were emancipated and whites wanted desperately to hang on to control and privilege and power and authority, and lynching became a means for cowing African Americans into submission. Obviously, there are also sexual connotations associated with it as well. It speaks to the virility of the white community and its dominance over the Black community, but also to white male virility. In addition to Eugene Daniels, as you can see, there were several other lynchings. I could not find a lot of information on Richard Cotton, but Harriet Finch and Jerry Finch, John Petersall, and Lee Tyson were executed were lynched in 1885 for the alleged murders of Eugene Finch and his sister Susan and their African-American servant. It is said that when they were taken to the Pittsburgh, when they were taken from Pittsburgh jail, that Harriet Finch screamed so loud that it awoken people who lived in the environs of the jail. Henry Jones Henry Jones was alleged to have killed a woman by the name of Nancy Welch, and he was, of course, he was lynched for that. And then we've had a very enriching and enlightening discussion of Eugene Daniels' experiences. So, standing the storm, George Moses Horton is a poet laureate of Chatham County. He was born in Northampton County. He became famous as being the first African-American in the South to write a book and to produce a book of poetry. He actually could not write, but he could read, and he performed poetry over at UNC and came to really make a name for himself in that way. There were free people of color in Chatham also. I'll focus on Louis Freeman today, who lived in Chatham in the early 19th century. We believe that he was born in about 1782. He was a property owner and lived in a one-room house on Main Street in Pittsburgh. He actually owned a couple of slaves that were probably family members, a wife and a son who he had manumitted in New York. As we come forward and we look at the post-emancipation period and civil rights, we can begin to look at some of the families here. And this is Nancy Burnett Price in the center, and to her left, our right, her youngest son, Jabe. Here is a listing of some of the African-American families, some of the old families here in Chatham. As we begin to look for our people, the ways that we can do it. We begin to identify places where we lived in numbers, and these are some of those family names. And there are others, of course. The backbone of our community continues to be evidence of which is today's program being organized and run by women. But the roles of Black women are very, very important. Black women had to overcome, obviously, multiple biases. Those biases included and problems included within our own community. They had to overcome issues of skin complexion. They had to overcome stereotypes. And those stereotypes often shaped our thinking about what they could not do, and served as an impediment for women who wanted to enter into certain areas of business and work and so forth for a very long time, and we're still working to overcome them. Black women roles in Chatham County, they were homemakers, teachers, and church leaders. Many of them worked outside of the home, jobs at local hospitals, restaurants, and for private families. Women in the community worked on the family farm, and women were involved in the home demonstration club that would ultimately lead to the development and launch of what is today the Chatham County Fair. Ties that bind the Black families. Here are just a few. This is the Price family. The parents of Maisel Price Roberts, who has been very kind to me and shared quite a bit of what she knows about Chatham County's history here. These are her folks. Her father was a farmer, and her older brothers worked the farm while he worked as a section worker. And I had recently a conversation with Floyd Wicker, who lives here in Durham, his daughter, and is from Chatham, and his daughter athletic director at North Carolina Central University, where I teach. And he was indicating how Jay Price is someone who encouraged him and helped move him along the way. One of my favorite stories associated with the families is this is a photo of Maisel Price Roberts at 12. And at 12, she had the responsibility of cooking 72 biscuits for her father and brothers to start each day. This is a photo of her father with some of his co-workers. The Williams family and the Williams family circle. The Williams family is a very large family in Williams Township and beyond. The matriarch of that family is M. Mountain Williams, who is believed to have been a Cherokee woman and was purchased perhaps down at the Market House in Fayetteville, North Carolina. She has a daughter by the name of Josephine Williams, who you see pictured here. And Josephine Williams is one of the founders of the New Hope Missionary Baptist Church. Photos of the Williams family. Also very helpful that the White Williams family was willing to share information about what they knew about the enslaved people that their ancestors had held. That is very important to our being able to reclaim our history. You have Plessy Williams Harris here on the left with her husband, Rencher Nicholas Harris, who was the first African-American elected to city council in Durham, North Carolina, that happening in 1953. I would be very careful if I became agitated towards a Williams. As you can see, they run pretty deep, but this is a photo of one of their family reunions. The church obviously is a cornerstone of the Black community, and it began in the slave quarters. Again, that was one of the places where enslaved people, where we have always gone for hope and for strength. And the same is true here in Chatham County. There are many churches. This is the Mount Zion Baptist Church, African-American churches in Chatham. You have the Mount Zion Baptist Church and the image of it, Hamlet's Chapel here, which opened in 1866. That's a photo of Hamlet's Chapel, CME Church. You have the St. James Mission, was established in Pittsburgh in about 1880. An aerial overview of it. The St. Matthew's AME Zion Church, and the AME Zion Church has a very substantial presence in Chatham County. You could see it was organized in the late 19th century. Image of it. Corinth AME Zion Church, established in 1884. Mount Sinai AME Zion Church, established in the 1880s. First church built in 1887. New AME Zion Church and Jordan Grove AME Zion Church, located out in the Matthews Township. There's G's Grove, which is in South City. It was established in 1852 and is perhaps the oldest church in Siler City. The Haw River Baptist Church. The church played a really critical role, and it was actually within the church that many of us is where we got our first educational lessons. But education's always been very important. It is an elevator in our community, and we must always protect it and do all that we can to support it. Blacks in Chatham obviously have long valued education. One of those who was preeminent, as I see it, was Simon Green Atkins, who was the founder of what is today Winston-Salem State University. He was a graduate of St. Augustine over in Raleigh, but he was born in Chatham County. You can see him here with his family. Those are teachers and students at Slater. The earlier schools here, again, were really in the slave quarters and then in our churches. But then after that, you had the Rosenwald schools that were established in Chatham County. And then you have the Pittsburgh Colored School, which would later become the Horton High School. School desegregation proceeded in Chatham County and similar to other places as well. Some of the outstanding business leaders, you had Todd Robeson Edwards, who owned a jewelry store in Chatham. You had John Council, who owned a confectionery in Chatham. This is all early 20th century. Manley Smith, an ice house, and later a funeral parlor. And then you have Gaston Alonzo Edwards, who was first Black architect in North Carolina. All very proud Chathamites. Edwards actually designed the hospital, the medical school at Shaw University, Leonard School of Medicine. His wife, Catherine R. Norris, Ruth Norris, established the music department at North Carolina Central University. Here you have Reverend Carl Thompson, who is the first African-American elected to county commission in Chatham County. He is also a proud Eagle and basketball player. He is a senior pastor at Word of Life Christian Outreach Center. The first African-American woman county commissioner was Uva Holland, who passed in 2019. He was elected in 1992 and reelected in reelected in 1996. Following on her heels, you have Margaret Bryant Pollard, who was the second African-American woman commissioner. We've named a school now for her. She helped develop land and strategic plan for the region and worked to protect the environment against toxins and pollution. The Chatham County Fair, I'll mention it in hopes that you all will all go out and participate in it, as it's that season. But Mildred Bright Payton was one of the leading influences in its development and establishment. And it opened in the early 1950s. I think the very first one was in 1950s. And it was an opportunity for local Black Chathamites who were working in agriculture to show their wares, and for wives to show what they were doing as part of home demonstration exercises, and to educate the community about best practices both in agriculture and home economics. Thank you all for listening. I hope that you've enjoyed this presentation. Again, it is recorded so that you can return to it. And thank you so much for inviting me, and congratulations on what has been an absolutely outstanding program. And I'm honored to have been a part of it.
At this time, we will hear from Representative Robert Rees. Following Representative Rees, we have Commissioner Diana Hales in the House today, and she will bring greetings from the Commissioner's board.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Johnson. That was really informative and really good. And good afternoon to everybody. It's funny, I just left an event and I was speaking at, and they were talking to me about Dr. Charles Johnson. I had to meet him and did not know we'd be on the program together. Sorry we're not in the building, but do look forward to meeting you. I want to thank everybody that was involved in putting this event together. I know these things are hard. Thank you, Mary, for your work. Thank you, Larry Brooks. Thank you, both NAACPs. And your work for positive change is tireless, and we appreciate it. All of us appreciate it. And we know it's not easy to organize and put together an event like this. And it's even harder when it's this kind of subject matter, especially in today's day and time. So we appreciate you doing this and appreciate this opportunity. Chatham's history is a difficult history when it comes to this subject. When you look at all the counties in North Carolina, Chatham County is number 2 out of all the counties in the number of recorded lynchings. And that's sad and it's scary, but it is a truth, and it's a truth that we appreciate you bringing to the forefront and making sure that we understand. But it really gives us an opportunity today to reflect on some of the stories of Black men and Black women who've made life in Chatham better for all of us, long before this time. If you look back, it's kind of amazing when you look at the timeline for where we were and where we are. It was actually less than 200 years ago, in 1830, that 1/5 of all of Chatham County's population were Black slaves. 1 in 5 people that lived in Chatham County were owned less than 200 years ago in 1830. But then just a little bit over a century later, in 1957, we had the founding of the Chatham County NAACP, which was outstanding. And these people began the tireless effort to try to bring about positive change in Chatham County, which of course led us to 1970, when we had Chatham schools fully integrated. And when you think through in that sense, people that are on this Zoom today, people who are participating in this event, all remember going to segregated schools. And so it was just that little bit ago that we were able to do that. And when you think of all those struggles, you think about some of the people who have made a difference in Chatham County and their history, and how important it is that we continue to tell the history orally, to present the history in school, to make sure that those histories stay in the forefront so that we understand what those struggles meant to us. One of the more famous people that I think of when you think of the origins of the struggle for African Americans in Chatham and in North Carolina would be George Moses Horton, who was born into slavery on a tobacco plantation in 1798. And even though it was against the law, taught himself to read and write, and eventually began making books. And he had his first book published in 1829, which is fascinating. That was called The Hope of Liberty. And he was hoping that if he continued to be able to sell these books and to make money from this, he might be able to buy his freedom. And unfortunately, he wasn't able to do that, and eventually had to go north and join the Union soldiers and hope for freedom through that. And then you look at Margaret Bryant Pollard, who was just presented earlier in Dr. Johnson's presentation. And not only was she one of our earlier African-American county commissioners, but she was the granddaughter of slaves. And think about that, because I mean, that's very recent. A lot of us remember Commissioner Pollard, but she was actually the granddaughter of slaves, but showed us what hard work and dedication could come from those beginnings that her parents had, and then obviously her grandparents had. And her contributions to this county are still being felt to this day. And then, of course, the person that we're here to commemorate with Eugene Daniel. And that lynching, as we already know, happened in 1921. More than 1,000 people came to see his body the next day after he was murdered, and he had just turned 16 years old. So these are the stories that we've got to make sure still stay in the forefront, because if we don't make sure these stories stay in the forefront, they don't stay in the forefront. They don't continue to be told, and then they fall off and don't become a part of our important history. And there are people today who don't want to talk about prior history, don't want to expose children to this. And I would contend, how do we raise the best people that we can raise? How do we bring forth our next great thinkers, our next great planners, the people who help make us a more just society? How do we present them if we don't present everything that has happened? Not to make people angry, not to make people upset, but to have people have a full understanding of where we were, where we are, and where we hope to head. So thank all of you for putting this event together today. Please understand, not only those who put together this event, but all of you that are participating, how important this is, that these stories continue to be told, continue to be brought forth. And it's an amazing opportunity that we have today to learn. Make sure that people continue to learn. Tell your children, tell your grandchildren, tell your friends, tell your neighbors, but let's make sure to keep these stories in the forefront. Thanks for letting me have an opportunity to participate today, and I look forward to continuing to interact and talk to all of you soon.
I'm looking around to see if Commissioner Hill, yes, would you come forward, please? Good afternoon to everyone, and I just wanted to give you greetings from Chatham County. Our chair, Mike Dasher, has been exposed to someone who tested positive for COVID, so he is sitting out everything for the next week. And I'm here to let you know that this particular Commission in Chatham County and governance is totally committed to equal rights and addressing equality and addressing what we can do for the minority communities, including African Americans and Hispanics in Chatham County. One of the things that was not mentioned in Dr. Johnson's presentation is that the two African American women commissioners overlapped. They were both on the commission for several years at the same time. And I have a feeling that might be fairly unique in the Piedmont. So what I also wanted to let you know, for those who have not been following news since in a while, is that under this particular Board of Commissioners, we removed the Confederate monument. And in 2019, we are still, we have the monument in storage. We want to give it back to the Daughters of the Confederacy, who actually own it. And the court case has been appealed. The county won the decision, but the Daughters of the Confederacy have appealed, and it is in the Court of Appeals right now. We recently passed a resolution for no discrimination in Chatham County businesses regarding gender, sex, race, even natural hair, because that is a condition that we find some of our African colleagues facing in employment practices. We also, for those who were at the earlier session, are going to bring a resolution on Monday for the county to officially apologize for the actions that it took in its past regarding not pursuing justice for the lynch victims and reprehensible deeds that might have been perpetrated because of county governments being lax. And we're happy to do that thanks to Commissioner Karen Howard for bringing that forward. So I just wanted to bring you greetings from Chatham County. We are so happy to have this event here today and for what it represents. And we anticipate there will be more events, one for each of the victims that were robbed of their life by a white mob. So thank you very much for being here. At this time, we will have remarks by our Chief Deputy Charles Garner. And after his remarks, he will also give a highlight of a brochure that was put together by the Community Remembrance Coalition Chatham. It is a Black History walking tour, 1 mile around the courthouse, north, south, east, and west. And I think some copies are here today.
Good afternoon, everyone. Well, I guess I need to try that again. Good afternoon, everyone. I realize it's been a long day, so I'm going to try to be brief and get through what I have before me. First of all, I want to thank Dr. Charles Johnson for the information he put out. So, people that participated in making this program so effective for our hearing. First First and foremost, I want to thank the Community Remembrance Coalition, Chatham County NAACP, branches 5377 and 5378 for allowing me to have the opportunity to speak to you guys today. But I do want to say this. When we talked about truth, and I think y'all heard a lot of truth. I talked about justice, slave justice. What is justice and what does that really mean? And also, when we look at your pamphlet, it talks about reconciliation. And what I also want here today is to define your role in reconciliation. What are you doing to reconcile? I also really want to emphasize the resiliency of our people that have achieved in spite of the many challenges and setbacks that we face daily and how we overcame. For us, it's not only cultural issues that we're dealing with. The same things is happening today. A lot of racism that you look is more covert than overt. Just a special note that I want to say real quick. We can all do better in order to be better. And I just wanted to give you remarks following up on Dr. Charles Johnson. For the African American Walking Tour, you should have received a pamphlet or it should be on the screen before you. African people survived despite segregation, discrimination throughout the history of enslavement that began over 250 years ago in Chatham County. Unfortunately, much of our Black history has been hidden and never recorded. Black families and Black churches deserve much of the history as possible within their communities. Many of you may not know that the first former slave to purchase land in Chatham Forest were Thomas and Rachel Taylor. The Taylor family owned their land for over 155 years. Also, one of our local ladies proudly donned hair, professionally hair design. She was an accomplished beautician. Was married to Patterson Farrell. She styled hair for over 60 years and was a proud owner of Murray Beauty Shop. And some of you all may be familiar with her. Her contributions remain, again, unknown and not recorded. During this tour, you will read about the history and the richness of Black culture, as well as the struggles of Black communities in Chatham County, such as Pittsburgh Color School, Woodland, Horton Middle School. And recently, as of this year, 2021, given the full name, his namesake, George Moses Horton Middle School. George Moses Horton was born an enslaved person. Again, he was freed after the Civil War and taught himself to read, which was forbidden for slaves. And you've heard his name being mentioned quite a few times. He composed and performed poetry about the rural landscape, Civil War, politics, and his harsh experiences in slavery. George Moses Horton holds the distinction of being the first African American to publish a book and the only to publish while in slavery. Also, please note that most of the places on this walking tour no longer exist, such as St. James Episcopal Church or Phil's Restaurant. It's so important that you use your imagination to capture the time when African American culture and entrepreneurship started here. African American people previously and currently own Chatham County businesses: Gene Taylor's Barbershop, Roy Silent, Dry Cleaners, Skurlock Caterings, Knox Funeral Home, and Lee's Barber/Beauty Shop, just to name a few that are here today in the Pittsburgh area. Again, I encourage everyone to look at your handout and read this information that is displayed before you. I also want to recognize members of our Chatham County African American community that have broken the racial barriers and contributed to many major accomplishments throughout the years, just to name a few. Margaret Pollard May was mentioned, the first African American woman given the full namesake of Margaret B. Pollard Middle School for her outstanding contributions to the community. We also heard Ms. Eva Howard, the first African American woman elected as a Chatham County Commissioner. And following me, I do believe, is Reverend Carl Thompson, the first African American elected as a Chatham County Commissioner. Isaiah Thomas, the first African American elected as Pittsburgh Town Commissioner. Gary Tyson, the very first African American Charlotte City Police Chief. We all also may know Robert Logan, the first African American superintendent of the Chatham County Schools. Sandra Gardner, the first African American social worker in Chatham County Schools, who happens to be my wife. Charles Gardner, which is myself, the first African American appointed chief deputy in the 250-year history of Chatham County Sheriff's Office. And why is that significant? 250 years until today, how important it is when you look at an African American person and they said, I am the first. I want to just say, let's give a round of applause to all of our barrier breakers and our history makers of Chatham County. However, we must clearly understand that there's still a long way to go. These are just small accomplishments, but there's still a long way to go. So I personally give thanks to all the men and women that are here today for your participation, because it shows a genuine interest in each and every one of you to learn about our heritage, to learn about our culture and what we've been through. What I asked and what I task each and every one of you again, what are you going to do about it? We hear the word all the time, fair and equal. Fair is not always equal. So let's do the right thing. Let's be better in order to do better. Thank you very much.
Now we will have remarks by Reverend Dr. Carl Thompson.
First of all, that it's a privilege and a pleasure to be with you all today. A couple of things that I'd like to say. First of all, I'd like to, before I get started, commend the Chatham County Commissioners. I just heard what Commissioner Diana Hill said about the board acknowledging the wrongs or the complicity of the county of Chatham, where past grievances are concerned, past wrongs. And so I think that's very courageous of them, very morally forthright and honest, but certainly courageous as well. And I just wanted to let you all know that I stand with you. You know, one thing about truth is that it's the path to reconciliation, but there has to be some contriteness, some acknowledgement of that truth on one side where perpetrators are concerned in order for forgiveness to come on the other side. And so I think that's an excellent path towards reconciliation in this county. So I applaud you all for that. Secondly, I would like to say to Dr. Johnson, a fellow Eagle, that he's done a very, very comprehensive job of gathering historical facts of Chatham County. A lot of that I didn't know But one thing I'd like to pursue with you, Dr. Johnson, if at all possible in the future, is to see if we can't document officially some of this history in Chatham County. There is an edition, I think, that has been written by the Historical Society. I believe it's been produced, called Chatham County History, but it's very scant when it comes to African-American history. And so I would like to pursue something with you, if at all possible in the future, to make that happen. That being said, again, I want to begin by congratulating the Community Remembrance Coalition Chatham and the NAACP branches 5377 and 5378 for this, what I see as an unprecedented and unique celebration of Chatham County history. Yeah, I know we all understand that anytime history is celebrated, we always have to look at the good and the bad. The history of every culture is replete with shining triumphs and horrific tragedies that are scattered throughout the landscape of time. Much of a historical celebration then must be from a view of where we were and where God has brought us to. We can celebrate history in that sense. We can see the atrocities of the past. We can see the hindrances of the past, but we can also see some deliverance in that we celebrate. So tragedies of history remind us of the power and joy of deliverance. So as I looked over the program for the morning ceremony, the Remembrance ceremony, it had one item on the program, the release of the spirit by Sheila Holland Thompson, and a presentation of the Eugene Daniel story by LaDawn Sanders. I couldn't help just seeing those names to think about 40 years ago or more. Because you see, in 1976, I graduated from college, from North Carolina Central University, and I came back to Chatham County looking to get involved in community advocacy. And so at the time, Reverend James Brown, who was a pastor of First Baptist Church in Silas City and was a community advocate and activist himself, suggested to me that I become a VISTA volunteer. Now, some of you may remember VISTA. It's been years ago, but it was a federal program that really called for volunteers, especially young people, to work in programs to eradicate poverty at the time. And so I was interested and I wanted to be involved. Reverend Brown told me to contact one lady, and it was Yuva Holland. And I remember now that she was the coordinator of the program, and I met her, Yuva Holland, former county commissioner, who was Sheila's mother and LaDawn's grandmother. And over the years, this was in 1977, but over the years, she became like a mentor to me and a friend, both she and her husband, Maynard Holland. And my wife and I still recall many, many times that we were at their home. It was like a second home almost. And I remember, I haven't seen them in a while, Minister LaDawn, but I remember her, she was very small then, very, very small. And I remember her running around the house and playing. And I remember her grandmother admonishing her from time to time to stay out of trouble. But it just brought back those memories at that time. There were many, many political discussions during that time. There had never been a Black county commissioner in Chatham County. There were very few in the state of North Carolina at the time. And so what we were doing was kind of cutting edge, and it was historical. And believe you me, she was very, very helpful in that regard, and later became a commissioner herself. So it was around the time that I was really campaigning for county commissioner, 1977, and very politically active, that I did a lot of campaigning in the Jordan Lake, that area. And I remember that the water had not even been impounded. So you could see the land, and you could actually see the land that was about to be impounded with water from the Hall River and the Deep River. And so I remember at times stopping and just from a vista, from a high up viewpoint, looking over the land of the lake and traveling all around it. And ultimately thinking about all the miles of water that would come. But little did I know at that time, didn't know, that I probably traveled in the area, in the very spot where the horrific crime, the murder of Eugene Daniels took place 100 years ago. And so I remember when I was 16, and let me ask you just to think back and remember when you were 16 years old. Your mind wasn't on politics. Your mind wasn't on the cares of the world. It's like me, as a young man, my mind was on girls and on sports and just having a good time and enjoying my youth. And I think now about the fear and the pain that a 16-year-old Eugene Daniel, just 16 years old, must have felt when he was being hung and probably brutally beaten and murdered in that situation, and it's unimaginable. And yet he is a symbol to us, a reminder of the many young people who experienced this unimaginable pain of being taken from the African homeland, never to see it again, brutalized, mutilated, raped and chained, taken to a place far away to be treated like animals, dehumanized in every possible way. But what we're saying today to the descendants of Eugene Daniels and to all the Eugene Daniels from those who experienced the race riots, Tulsa, Oklahoma, Wilmington, North Carolina, and all over the South, to those millions who died during the Middle Passage, and those who experienced the scourge of slavery and Jim Crow, and even to the George Floyds of history and present. We're saying that while many in this society, America at large, have revised American history and changed the narrative to hide and sweep under the rug the many atrocities like this lynching, that we're here today saying to as many of those who would hear us that we will never forget their humanity, that we'll never forget that they were once a living, breathing person with hopes and dreams, loves and desires, that they were somebody's brother, sister, somebody's mother, or father. Now, I understand that many people who hear the recounting of this tragedy, I understand how much pain and anguish it brings. Mark Barossa did an excellent job of vividly painting the historical narrative of this atrocity, putting the pieces together, exposing the murders and accomplices to this horrendous crime. Somehow Chatham County historians have ignored it, and we can understand why. But let us let this pain stare us in a positive way and not hide or run from it. In his Nobel lecture in 1986, Elie Wiesel recalled the eminent historian Simon Dubnow, who over and over implored his fellow inhabitants in the Rigal ghetto during the Holocaust. He said, Jews, write it all down. Many Holocaust victims felt an overpowering need to preserve the truth. Countless victims became chroniclers and historians in the ghettos, even the death camps, said Wiesel. They left behind extraordinary documents to testify became an obsession. They left us poems, letters, diaries, and fragments of novels, some known throughout the world, others still unpublished. And when war was over and the mind-boggling scope of the final solution was finally and fully grasped, the Germans and their collaborators had annihilated 6 million Jews from every corner of Europe, wiping out more than 1/3 of the world's Jewish population. The moral imperative to remember grew even more intense. So Judaism, which is always attached intense significance to remembrance, the article goes on to read, in multiple passages, the Hebrew Bible makes it even an explicit religious obligation No surprisingly, Israel's parliament long ago added Yom HaShoah, or Holocaust Remembrance Day, to the Jewish calendar each spring. For many Holocaust survivors and their children, never forget, never forget, understandably became almost an 11th commandment. Like the Jewish Holocaust survivors and the nation of Israel, we as Black Americans, we as Black Chathamites, have a moral imperative to never forget the horrendous atrocities committed against us throughout the landscape of the history of America, and indeed this county. But we need to be vigilant in making sure that these atrocities never happen again. British statesman Winston Churchill once wrote, "Those that fail to learn from history are doomed to repeat it." Now, if there are those of us who would like to forget, let me remind you of George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, Tamir Rice, and I could go on and on. The poet Maya Angelou once stated this. She said, "History, despite its wrenching pain, cannot be unlived. But if faced with courage, need not be lived again." So let me say to you all today that we have a moral obligation to remain vigilant and not let the atrocities of the past become the events of today. We must have the courage to speak out against the wrongs of systemic racism, to stand for truth no matter the cost, and hold our fellow human beings accountable when they forget or remain silent due to callous disregard, intimidation, or fear. A wise man once said, "You shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free." And I believe we all know who that was, Jesus Christ. Systemic racism exists solely because too many people have believed the lie. It can only be dismantled when people are told the truth and acknowledge it. Then and only then will reconciliation take place, and hopefully reparations will follow. And this must be done in love and not hatred or bitterness. Let me say this: hatred and bitterness only serve to poison the soul of any individual who does so. Let me close by giving you a quote from Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. He said these words about history. He said, "We are not history makers, we are made by history. We are not history makers, we are made by history." And so I leave you all with this question today: how has history made you? How has history made you? How has the participation and the hearing and the understanding of everything that's happened today, how has that affected you? How has that made you? And hopefully just understanding what has passed on today has made all of us more mindful of the pain and sacrifices and the exceptionality of our ancestors and their courage, sheer fortitude, and faith in God that has passed a rich history and legacy to our generation. So let us be mindful and with due diligence pass this rich history and legacy on to the next generation and teach them to never forget. Thank you.
This time, we're going to have a very special presentation by Mr. Elliot Finster. And his sister is also here today, Miss Emily Finster. You all come forward, please.
I figured we could just stand here and talk. Is that, so there's no adjustment or anything.
I think I got my paper right.
Oh, yeah. How does this work for you?
Yep.
Okay.
an incredible day to be a part of. I'm Emily Feenstra. I'm here from Washington, DC, with my brother Elliot. And we are descendants of a slaveholder in Chatham County in the 1700s. We came to share a little bit about our family now and our connection to Chatham County, and to stand witness to the truth that we're telling today and start a conversation about repair and what role we might play as people who don't live here but are part of the shared history. So we're going to do this in a format essentially where I'm going to interview Elliot. He has the hard part. I get to ask the questions. So before we get to our family history and why we're here, it might be helpful for folks to know a little bit more about you. Can you tell us about some of the work you do and your interests?
Sure. I also wanted to say thank you to Bob Pearson and to Mary Nettles who invited us here. About a year and a half ago, I reached out by email and here we are. I live in Southwestern Oregon and we just flew out here to be here today. So I'm a theater maker and an artist. I work as a community organizer I live in a pretty conservative rural area. I work with LGBTQ folks in my county. And one of the themes of my work has been working with communities to gather stories and then make plays that reflect back our community experiences. So that's something I've been doing in rural Oregon. And I started doing genealogy research maybe 10 years ago. As Reverend Thompson said, this idea that we're made by history, and I wanted to dig into my family history to have a sense of who I am in the world, and what some of I believe that our ancestors speak through us and are shaping who we are in the present. And my family now, none of our family lives in Chatham County now. And our family is a little bit comedically placeless. My dad is Dutch, was raised in Vancouver. He moved to New York. My mom's family, which is where the Poe line comes down to us. She was born in Greensboro, but her dad was in the Air Force. They moved all over before coming back to Tullahoma, but she fled the South, in her words, and moved to New York City where my parents met. And then we grew up in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. So I don't feel super connected to any of those places. And was maybe looking for some kind of connection in looking into my own history.
So, Elliot puts it lightly when he talks about collecting stories. He really likes to collect and tell stories that, frankly, people in the community that he's in don't really want to hear, about people who are oppressed or have not had justice in that community. So tell us, you already told us a little bit about why you're looking into genealogy. Tell us about how you found out about our connection to Chatham County.
Well, I was working on a solo performance piece, and I was all about reckoning with inheritance and ancestors in a sort of abstract sense. And one day I Googled, did my ancestors own slaves? And I found the 1870 census, which is when enslaved people started to be listed by name. And in about 20 minutes, I was like, oh, the answer is yes. I mean, there was a couple years of work and getting names and details before that. And I'm no kind of genealogical professional. Our ancestor, Jesse Poe, lived in Chatham County up over on George's Creek. He was born around 1760 and died in 1858. His son, Haston Poe, so he's 7 generations back from us. And his son, Haston Poe, and then his son, Thomas Joseph Poe. They lived on what was the Poe Plantation, 3 miles up the Haw River from Moncure, which was later sold to the state of North Carolina and became the site of the dam for Jordan Lake. And at the time of Jesse Poe's death, his will, which I found in my research, listed 26 people that were enslaved by their family by name. And so when I found that list, I wanted to know more. I wanted to know more of the story and who were these people and what is the situation of their descendants and how does this history impact my family and the descendants of those people? Are we connected somehow? Yeah, and I just felt I had to find out more.
So how do you go? There are a lot of feelings associated with finding out that history, which in some way is surprising because it's not a story that was ever passed down to us.
Mhm.
And in other ways, it's not surprising because we're white people who have family that grew up in the South. How did you go from those feelings to some action, and what was that first action?
Well, I think in some sense we're here holding these questions to listen, to learn, to ask what role our family, our extended family might have in repairing this history. What does it mean to acknowledge? So I reached out to my family and sent an email, attached some documents, and I said, this is what I found out, and let's chat. And that process took a couple of years, and immediately some people wrote back and said, like, we're not interested, and other people said, like, oh yeah, like let's talk. So I was also there's a quote from Ta-Nehisi Coates that I read in his article on reparations in the Atlantic in 2014 that really influenced my thinking. He said, white supremacy is a fundamental force in America. It's difficult to imagine America without it. So we must imagine a new country. Reparations, by which I mean the full acceptance of our collective biography and its consequences, is the price we must pay to see ourselves squarely. Reparations beckons us to reject the intoxication of hubris and see America as it is, the work of fallible humans. What is needed is an airing of family secrets, a settling with old ghosts. What is needed is a healing of the American psyche and a banishment of white guilt. I thought that resonated with what Elliot from Equal Justice Initiative, what you said about the new era of recognition and justice. So I shared that quote in my email with my family, and then when I reached out to Bob Pearson, who I found through Googling the NAACP in Chatham County last year in August.
Yeah. What do you think are some barriers that other families, I mean, we have a pretty somewhat progressive family, and still some people said, no, thank you. I do not want to have this conversation. Why do you think that is, and how do we overcome some of the barriers to other families having this conversation?
I don't know that I can say anything that, I'm here like learning so much today, and anything we say, I think is like ripples and echoes of what's already been said. I think that some of the barriers that came up for me, which are similar maybe to barriers that come up for other people, are a sense of fragility or a fear that talking about race will ruin our relationships, or that the feelings that come up would be so big that they couldn't be confronted or overcome. And I don't think that's true. I think that what can come from this engagement is a sense that we're intricately bound, and that our networks of kinship and relationship and connection and accountability to each other is deeply meaningful and rich, and that a lot is possible. I've just connected with people through this process. I mean, William Poe and Clarence Poe are researchers in this area who I've connected with. Yeah, and even today, people that I've met and talked with. Yeah, I think we're not Jesse Poe. We did not enslave those people. But I think we have inherited a debt, and we have some obligation to start by telling the truth in our own family and the truth about slavery and learning what that truth is so that we can tell that story and tell it differently than it was told to us.
So, do you think it's important for other white people to do the family ancestry research to figure out whether their family was slaveholders?
I think there's a lot of ways. I don't know. We were just talking about this in the car. I think for me, in theater, we talk about how through the specifics, you can talk about the universal. Like racism is this huge, and slavery are these systems that we live in. And for me, in doing this research and coming here, and learning about Jesse Poe, my grandmother's grandmother was Clara Bell, and is descended from the Bell family that lived in the Bells area near here. And so in learning today that's where Eugene Daniels was taken and lynched, I'm wondering what they were up to that day. And if I can find that out and who to ask, and whether or not I can find that out, or I sense the tragedy and complicity in that and the consequences of it today. So I think that this ancestry work and as white people, it's a way to acknowledge that racism is a thing of the present, not just the past. Then we're not absolved from responsibility.
Mm-hmm. I think I'll just add one thing there, which, the prior speaker, the Reverend, was talking about the history of the Holocaust and of Jewish people. And there's a great article in which a Jewish person says, I don't identify as white. Why do I have to check this checkbox? And the author writes around kind of the definitions of race from the beginning are made up and intended to reinforce this artificial hierarchy. But he says, although you may not identify with this, how you want to be perceived does not change how you are perceived by the world. And as a white person, you have privilege that you can use to make change and do work to combat institutional racism, which is very much a part of the world that we all live in. So with that, just recap for us what you are trying to hoping to achieve in coming.
As I said, we're here to learn. It's really meaningful. Like behind me is standing my Uncle Joe and my mom, Julie Hagan, and my cousins who are all like listening on Zoom. We're going to watch the recording, and part of our commitment is to have this conversation in our family about and make a decision about an action that we can take to repair those wrongs, and then to invite our extended family into that action. So I know there's been Poe family reunions. The other folks who are descended from Jesse Poe have gathered in Chatham County like many years, and some of my family in this area who didn't want to be here today. So that's part of our commitment, is to follow through and have those conversations. And also, if you know more about the Poe family, or you know anybody who does, or the stories of the people who were enslaved by them, we'd love for you to reach out. We want to learn more about what happened, the stories of those folks who are our kin. And I hope that this is the time, and that we can learn about just what our role might be in the really good work that you're doing here. So thanks for your leadership and your organizing and your vision and your hospitality.
Dr. King envisioned a time when sons of former slaves and sons of former slave owners would be able to sit together at the table of brotherhood. And we're really excited that we hope that that time is now. We welcome your thoughts on how our family, how we who don't live in this community may play a role in the reconciliation and remembrance work. And thank you for your time and your hospitality.
Thank you.
This time we will have remarks from Minister LaDawn Sanders. Ms. Sanders is the great niece of Eugene Daniels.
Good afternoon. On behalf of the Daniel family, I'd like to thank you all for taking part in this conversation. If I could just recall some of the things that Reverend Thompson just spoke of. My grandmother, I remember as a child, the time that he was speaking of, I was probably about, in 1977, I would have been about 6 years old. But I do remember my grandmother's work with him. She was a fierce advocate, and I remember her even working on his campaign. My grandmother worked for the Commission for Racial Justice, and she was always an advocate for those who did not always have a voice for themselves. And what I can say, and what I appreciate, and what I believe is taking place now here with this conversation is what our parents taught us, all of you who stand in this room or sit in this room today. The conversation begins at the kitchen table. Hate is taught at the kitchen table, and so is love. And so many of us today have chosen love. We have chosen the conversation to move the conversation forward in love together. And it's really not, even though I said earlier this morning that Eugene's story did not end with triumph, it was tragic. And I even talked with my husband as we drove here this afternoon, recalling the fact that I have 3 children myself, and 2 sons. And the thought of a 16-year-old being taken in the middle of the night to be harmed, and likely knowing that that was going to be his demise and never seeing his mom or dad again, it is just unimaginable. But in that, our family still, we were resilient even after the tragedy. We chose to love. We chose to stay in Chatham County. Our perseverance did not get shuttered because of the tragedy. And I thank you all for standing with us and being a part or allowing the table to sit at the table together to have this conversation. It is so important to move us all forward. Thank you.
Be sure to watch ABC and CBS News tonight because they covered the Eugene Daniels service this morning. And thank you all for participating, whether you are on Zoom or here in person. And at this time, we will have Elder Frazier, who is the AME Zion District, Zion Durham District. Will you come forward, please, and give remarks and close us out?
certainly we want to thank you for the opportunity for us to come and share this afternoon, this auspicious occasion, and certainly it's a joy to be a part of all of you this evening. I promise you that I won't be here but just a second. I know that you all have been here quite some time, so I'm just going to try to be as brief as possible, and we will move right on and get you all out of here. Is that all right? Amen. So first of all, again, my name is Ricky Frazier, and I am the presiding elder of the Durham District of the AME Zion Church. And I just come to give the closing prayer. But before I give the closing prayer, just want to lift up a few stanzas from James Weldon Johnson's song, Lift Every Voice and Sing. And I just want to start off by just quoting some of that song. Stony the road we trod, bitter the chastening rod, felt in the days when hope unborn had died. Yet with a steady beat have not our weary feet come to the place from which our fathers sighed. We have come over a way that with tears has been watered. We have come treading our path through the blood of the slaughtered, out from the gleaming past. Here now we stand at last where the white gleam of our bright star is cast. God of our weary years, God of our silent tears, thou who has brought us thus far along the way. Thou hast by thy might led us into the light. Keep us forever in the path, we pray. Lest our feet stray from the place, our God, where we met thee. Lest our heart drunk with the wine of the world, we forgot thee. Shadows beneath thy hand, may we forever stand. True to our God, true to our native land. Let us now bow for a moment of prayer. And Father, you have been our dwelling place in all generations. Before the mountains were born, or you gave birth to the earth and the world. Even from everlasting to everlasting, thou art God. And we celebrate and reflect on this historical event, a man lynched but not forgotten. Lord, we give you glory for the great things you are doing to encourage the Community Remembrance Coalition, Chatham National Association for the Advancement of Colored People and branches. Lord, our Father, have faith and fought to freedom on these hallowed grounds. And for that, God, we're grateful. Please watch over these families and friends who have gathered to honor the Daniel family. Embrace them with the inseparable twins, mercy and grace. Comfort them only as you know how, in the matchless and marvelous and magnificent name of him who is the Christ. Amen.